Hey, good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing? Or good night, good evening, good afternoon. Oh, so many people here. It's really it's about 10 a.m. here where I am, roughly. I'm sorry I'm late again. I just I was up pretty late last night working on a new video. Um which hopefully you guys will like. It's I'm gonna go through all of the functions that you can assign to a function button. And man, there's like 28, 30 of them per button. So I spent a lot of time going through each one, trying to figure each one out to make sure, I could make it a teachable kind of thing. Oh, but yeah, it's been a long week because here in the US, the tax deadline is next week. Even though it's extended, I still waited to the last minute. And I think I talked about it a little bit on Thursday. I just can't believe how much money I spent on gear this year, or last year, I should say. And not so much gear, there's the two cameras that I got, or I bought three cameras. Um, EM5 Mark III, GX85, and what was the other one? The Fujifilm X-T30. And, of the three, the EM5 Mark III is still my favorite. It's really the only one I use when I go out shooting for the tutorials and vlogs and things, because it's such a small, lightweight camera and has the headphone mic jack, or the mic jack, and the flippy screen, so I can vlog with it and take pictures. But I just haven't had much chance to vlog because of, I don't know, I'm a little paranoid with all the things going on, because it's it's kind of crazy what people are doing, and all the gunfire and everything else going on. Oh, so yeah. And man, I made two videos this week too, right? That HDMI card thing, which someone said they were able to get audio through it. So I think it might be just the EM10 Mark II that doesn't push audio out through the HDMI cable. So I have to try a different cable camera and see. But let's see who's here. We have Plato and Hans and Korna and Joan. Uh, and Kostov. Oh, always good to see you, Kostov. And Amadori Photography. Um, Nature with Music. I appreciate you guys coming in. If not every stream, every week, to come and hang out with me. It's always fun to kind of chat about photography and what's going on. I guess I haven't even looked at in detail the specs. There's a Canon came out with an R5 and an R6. Uh, it's just not on my radar. So I saw the thumbnails all over the place for those two cameras coming out. And I don't know. I tried to watch Fro, because you guys know I like Fro. And about a minute into it, I just lost interest in even, so it just kind of played in the background, and I didn't even, he might have said the specs, but I can't even remember. Something about a 4K crop and one, and no 4K. It's just all stuff, right? Something about getting raw video or 10-bit video. And unless really you have a really powerful machine or an extreme amount of patience, those specs just don't do the average person any good. F11 lenses from Canon. No, I haven't seen those either. Like I said, when I see Canon, Nikon thumbnails come up in my YouTube, I've been kind of skipping them. Uh, but F11, what's the focal range? I mean, what's the focal range? Are they zoom? Well, they're not zoom lenses if you're saying they're F11s. So they're probably a telephoto prime. Tell me what focal lengths they are, and then I can kind of give you my thoughts on that. But F11 is just really slow. My God, you'd have to be shooting, on the sun or something to, to get anything bright enough. Well, I guess you mean 600 and 800 millimeters. Wow. Yeah, that's too slow. I mean, even the kit lens, I have a 600 millimeter Nikon lens that's like f6.7. Why on earth would they go f11? What would be the point of that? I'm trying to think. I can't even think of any. I can't think of any real practical use for it. It's kind of like sounds like a specialized lens, like a fisheye, right? You only use it for something very specific. Uh, unless it's like super small and lightweight, what? And even then, you carry the small lightweight lens out, but then it's all your pictures are dark. I just wonder when they go into designing products or making products, what the heck they're thinking. Where did they get the marketing research to say, yeah, let's make a lens like this? Yeah, they're light and small, yeah. But like I said, even if they're light and small, you take them out and they're too dark. Because typically with telephoto, man, you have to have a pretty fast shutter speed. If you follow the standard rules, like you'd have to be at one on the 600 millimeter lens, you'd have to be at 1/1200th of a second. At 800 millimeters, 1/1600th of a second. I mean, really at a minimum. And then be at f11 on top of that. Wow, that's it'd have to be pretty bright, you know, because full daylight is what typically f16. The sunny 16 rule, right? f16 at ISO 100, 100th of a second. So take it down, what, a stop? So you could be at 1/50th, but then you have to go back up to 1/1200. So 100, 200, 400, 800, 1200. That's 5 stops back to a shutter speed that would be usable. So basically that's telling me the subject has to be 5 times brighter than normal daylight. Maybe I got the math wrong. I'm still a little bit foggy because I just woke up. I think I did that right. I'd have to go 5 stops back up. Or you would be 5 stop. Yeah, I did that right. Oh, so they claim 8 stops of stabilization. Yeah, it doesn't matter, unless you're shooting still life. But telephoto is usually trying to do some action, right? A person running, or a tiny little bird where they're always kind of twitching around. So like I said, you have to be a really fast shutter speed. I mean, for birds in flight and small tiny birds, 1/2000th of a second, then I can get a sharp image. And image stabilization is almost irrelevant at that point. um, let's see, lightweight shooting camels in the desert at high noon. That's good, Kevin. That would be a viable subject, I guess, for that lens. You could get like virtually a twilight shot of those camels along the pyramids, maybe in broad daylight. It would look like a twilight shot. uh let's see, looks like question from Hart. I have an EM5 Mark II. I know it's got sync IS with pro lens, but is there any reassurance on icon or setting to make sure it's working? uh Dang it, I don't have any lenses with sync IS to confirm that. But Robin Wong did a really good video on image stabilization, and he talked about lenses with Sync IS in that video. If I remember correctly, when you put a lens on with Sync IS, the camera chooses for you what to do. And you don't have to worry about it. It's just kind of done for you. But that's honestly, that'd be a better question for Robin Wong, since he has lenses with Sync IS, or Peter or Jimmy Chang. Yeah, sorry. I if it's something I have, I can usually answer the question or figure it out, but that's just not an area lens I have. And I don't have any lenses with Sync IS. Because those lenses are usually kind of big and heavy, right? The 12 to 100 has Sync IS, and I think the 300 f4. This lenses that really expensive and not on my radar. Let's see. Dave is saying at 1 million ISO. And Han says only BC reviews available from ambassadors, non-independent. Okay. I guess we're talking about those Canon lenses or Canon cameras. Oh, there's already mention of possible heat problems and really very bad battery life. It's got, yeah, you know, if you're trying to suck in raw video at 8K, you need a pretty powerful battery too. That's a ton of processing power, which is totally contradictory to what a camera should be, and that's about taking photos. So hopefully those cameras have some way to use external power source, and so that people that are interested in cinematography and like making short movies and things can use the camera. Because think about like that Blackmagic Cinema had the same issue with battery life anyway. I don't think it had any heating problems, but battery life, so they allowed you to hook up external power, no problem. It had plugs for it. So unless they did that with the Canon, you know, you'll be able to get 5 minutes of video, maybe. I don't know what, you know, but some short amount of time before the battery's dead. And it's not good. It's not good workflow when you have to change a battery every 15 to 30 minutes if you want to shoot at 8K. And then of course the overheating problem, because the processor inside the camera has to be working hard on top of the sensor being on constantly. And those two things combined, and the battery drain at that level is going to make the battery hot too. You know, and there's ways to manage all of that, right? But there's a lot of technical challenges there dealing with heat. So I can see where there might be some possible heat problems. You know, that's why like the EM1X, you know, they put heat pipes inside the camera to keep it cool, because they had to put two processors in there. So now you have double the heat coming off the processors in the camera. So Olympus, you know, that was their solution, right? I don't know what Canon's solution is going to be. You know, the consumer's not ready for 8K, and if you're in a cinematography, you're looking at those like Red Dragon machines or whatever they're called, where they're massive, right? And they got cooling fans on the outside everywhere to keep it cool. So, you know, and that's the cooling solution for high-end cameras, is they actually just put giant fans on them. Oh, and the Panasonic S1R has a little fan too, right? So Canon, if they think they can cool the thing down without fans, drawing in 8K video, I'd be really interested to see what that solution is, because there's just massive amounts of heat being drawn out everywhere on that thing. Nature says, I tried to do sunburst photos yesterday evening, Rob. The settings I had on my G9 was 12 to 35, was ISO 200 f22, and shutter speed I had was 1/6. Uh, okay, the key, one of the things when you're doing sunburst photography is, like one of my lenses, some lenses do sunburst better than others, for one. Uh, and it's something you just have to try different lenses and see. But one of my lenses, I think it's the 12 to 32 Panasonic lens, another Panasonic lens, right? But that lens, the starburst is a little bit weak. So what I have to do is you have to get the lens, the sun, to kind of peek out between a corner or an edge. So, let's say you have a branch sticking out. You need to put the sun right up next to that branch or between two branches, like this, so that it kind of exaggerates the starburst a little bit. And I get much better starburst effect when I do that than if I just have the sun, say example, standing out in the middle of sky with no clouds. There's no sunburst. Uh, so that's what I do when I have a lens that doesn't do sunburst too well, or starburst. And one of the best lenses ever for starburst, it's actually my Nikon 20mm f1.8. I haven't taken it out forever, but man, that thing makes terrific starburst, even with the sun dead center in the sky with nothing around it. But when a lens is a little bit weak with the starburst effect, uh, usually having it peak like between a tree or between two branches or coming off the edge of a building, those kind of things help. Yeah, nature says he uses 1/1500th of a second with birds. Yeah, I mean, at a minimum. I mean, you can get away with 1/1000th of a second if it's a large bird, like a blue heron or something. But the smaller the birds get, the faster your shutter speed has to be. Apparently, they're small when collapsed primes that take advantage of mirrorless viewfinders and autofocus. Okay. Rob, the only lens that has Sync IS, as far as I know at the moment, is the 300 Pro. I think the 12 to 100 Pro has it too, though. I'm pretty sure. Um, the R6 will be 2,600 pounds for a camera that is basically an EM1.3 in full frame. I haven't seen all the specs. The EM1.3 has so many features. And I guarantee, because like I said, I was working on this button video yesterday. No other camera has customizability like the OMDs. Oh my God, they really went overboard with the customization on these cameras. I mean, I guess ultimately there's a problem with customizing OMDs. Uh, they're so customizable, and this is the good part. I'll come with the good news first. You can customize these cameras so much that you can get it to work and operate that works with your brain, right? Your workflow in your brain and your muscle memory and everything, so that you can get very fast and efficient when you're in the field, because the camera is like an extension of your brain and your fingers, right? And you can be very, very efficient once you have it all set up. The bad side of that is setting it up, right? Because to add all of that customization, that workflow of setting it up may not work with your brain. Like if the two things are compatible, like the way the menus are set up and how you customize things uh, fits your brain patterns okay, then you're all good. But for most people, the workflow of the menu system is very it's a mess. Nothing makes sense really to my brain why they set things up the way they did. And and things, so many things can go wrong during the process, which is, seriously, I spent about God, 4 or 5 hours yesterday uh just programming one button and figuring out every single thing that can be wrong. during that process. And that's partially due to, I have to think of a way I can teach it, right? On top, because I can't just like click a button and say this is how you do it. I have to kind of follow up with a little bit of, watch out for this, make, this is why it has to be this way, blah blah blah. And uh so I don't know how the average newbie, somebody just getting into photography or just starting to use cameras, because maybe they've been doing photography with their phone for years, right? But just starting to get into cameras could possibly get into all of that in the menu, because the workflow is very different than a cell phone or point and shoot or whatever. Um, let's see, the 40 to 150, I guess that has sync IS. Yeah, that's a lens I want to get though eventually. I'm just I almost got all my credit cards maxed out, so I have to wait a little bit. Um, anyone have any vintage lens that you adapted to OM43 that you recommend? Well, that's a general question for the crowd, but it depends on the focal length that you wanna go for and the look that you wanna go for. So the popular vintage lenses is like that Helios 58 millimeter that has really interesting bokeh. It's very kind of swirly and messy. Well, messy is the wrong word, but it's very artistic, I guess, is the right word, because it's not a mess. It's actually very nice for portraits, and it's a fast lens. I think it's an f2. It's not one that I've gotten yet, but I want to. Um, a good standard like lens, and the problem with adapting lenses, most of them are made for full frame cameras, and the focal lengths are typically like 50 millimeters, 35 millimeters, right? And these are relatively telephoto on our micro four thirds. So if you can, and the wider you go, the more expensive they get. Good luck finding a wide angle lens, vintage lens, cheap. It's just not going to happen. Um, if anybody knows of a cheap wide angle, like a 20 millimeter, let me know. But you know, so there's the Helios 58, which is great for portraits, and that's like a $50 lens. The ones that's a little more accessible for me anyway here in the US are like um, the OM lenses from Olympus. The OM Zequos, the 50 millimeter f1.8 is really good. That's $30 to $50. You have to, at f1.8 it's a little soft, but at f4, tack sharp and beautiful bokeh. And the 24 millimeter f2.8 from Olympus, the OM, $100 to $200 depending on condition. But that's more of a standard lens that I think is really good. And then on the telephoto side, the Nikon 200 millimeter f4 is pretty amazing lens. It's heavy, it's one that I have. This one's got the adapter on it, but it's already got a built-in lens hood. It's f4, so it's pretty fast for 200 millimeters. And the pictures that come out of this are just magic. I'll have to do a video shoot with this one day, a vlog or something, and share some images, because they're really amazing. But it's hard to find a subject for something like this, right? Because this is typically sports action type lens. But I can do some images with this. The few that I have are okay, that I've taken with it. But I have to really get out and shoot with it at that focal length for a while before I can get some decent images where I understand the composition and everything that I need to get to make it look decent. So that's a good range from 24 up to 200. Uh, Never buy any zoom lenses when you're trying to adapt lenses to the camera, because there's no way to really set the image stabilization on a zoom lens, because every time you zoom, the IBIS is going to be off. So you could use a zoom lens, but you'd have to turn the IBIS off, generally speaking, keep your shutter speeds relative to the focal length that you're shooting at. And most of those vintage zoom lenses suck. And if there is a good zoom lens out there that's vintage, it's expensive. So I don't recommend zoom vintage lenses unless you really want it, because it's a very special lens, very sharp, or has some very special characteristic. But generally, with vintage lenses, if they're expensive, there's usually a reason for it, because most vintage lenses should go for next to nothing. You know, like the OM 50mm f1.8 is, virtually, doesn't cost anything, $30 to $50, but it's a great lens. A lot of the Nikon vintage lenses are good too, the 51.8s, and I prefer the AI or the AI versions because of the all metal build. But if you want to stay compact and lightweight, the Nikon E series lenses are really good. Very, very lightweight. They have more plastic in them and stuff, but they're probably a little easier to manage on a Micro Four Thirds system. Or more, I would not manage, but I would say uh, more in the spirit of Micro Four Thirds, like the E series. I think it's a 100mm uh, prime lens is really good. The E series 50mm f1.8 pancake lens, really good lens. And they come in both plastic and metal. And the metal one I think is made by Nikon, then the E series is plastic. So the plastic one is just as good too. Um, oh, Nature has a 200mm macro with a speed booster. Yeah, I gotta find my speed booster. I don't know what happened to it. Becker says, I have an EM10 Mark II with a 12 to 40 f2.8 Pro lens. I've been photography for 5 years for family, but don't get very sharp photos in sun. Any suggestions on how to improve sharpness for portrait and landscape? Wow. I'd have to see your images to kind of get a feel for why the images are not very sharp. So the question is here, do you get sharp images sometimes, but most of the time the images are not sharp, or they don't seem sharp all the time? Usually the biggest thing to getting sharp images is getting closer and using the wide angle a little more. The further away you get from something, even if you zoom in, a lot of times, you lose that sharpness. Uh, and But I've gotten really good images with my EM10 Mark II and a 12 to 40. That's not a combo I use much, but uh, try getting closer. And in the sun, if you're in the sun, make sure you're using the lens hood, because sometimes when the sun gets onto the lens directly, that can soften it up as well. Even though you may not notice it in the viewfinder EVF. Uh, and they, and this is why I'm a big advocate of lens hoods, because they say they got coatings and everything on there to help reduce flare and softness that's caused by the sun being directly on the lens. But I always use a lens hood, and then watch your shutter speeds. If you are shooting in bright sun, shutter speed should not be an issue. But for people, generally 1/200th of a second or better for just kind of random shots for people. And if you're at 1/200th of a second or better, make sure your ISOs are low. Like, always try to be at ISO 200, 400 at most, because anytime you start bumping the ISO, you start to lose detail. And so like I said, if I saw some EXIF data of your images that you didn't think was very sharp, I might be able to offer some more suggestions, but generally it's usually shutter speed. There's that tiny bit of motion blur in the photos. The other thing you can do is even in bright daylight, sometimes using a flash can sharpen the photo up, because the flash has a very fast firing speed, so it virtually freezes um, the motion in the image. So what I'd recommend is, I have a few videos on lens comparisons, right? Where I compare the 12 to 40 Pro against prime lenses, against the kit lens. And in those videos, I punch in, I pixel peep on the images when I'm doing those comparisons, and see if those images look comparable to what you're getting. Because some of those images are pretty sharp in those videos. And because I got an email from one viewer saying that they bought the EM5 Mark III and they're using one of the Pro lenses. I think it was a 12 to 40. And they were not happy with the sharpness of the image. And when I looked at him, his biggest problem was really choosing a focus point. He was not choosing, because he was taking these wide shots, but then his hyperfocal distance was wrong. So there's a little bit of softness there, but some of the images, he got pretty much what I was getting. Very similar in terms of sharpness. I had to pixel peep in to kind of see what he was talking about, but so I emailed him back and I said, I gave him those tips about, focus points and things like that, but I also said, you're getting pretty much what the camera's capable of. This is the kind of resolution you can expect from this camera, or it's very similar to what I'm getting. So maybe his expectations were really much higher because it's not a cheap system, right? You spend $1,000, $2,000, and maybe your expectations are, razor sharp images from a digital camera, when uh, if it doesn't meet your expectations, I can see that. And hence, the very high megapixel images where people can crop into a little ant on a leaf and still see some detail, right? These cameras are not going to do that at 20 megapixels or 16 megapixels. But yeah, watch those videos and see if you get a similar feel. If the images from my video look similar to what you're getting, or if it's still way off, then it's probably some user error, right? You're doing something wrong in your technique when you're taking images. Because if you just go out and put the camera in program mode or auto mode and take a picture, honestly, they're not that much more interesting than what you can do with a cell phone already. The cell phones are so good now, right? Hence the market is what it is. But I wish I could be a little more helpful, but I hope that helped a little bit anyway. Uh, Vivitar 70 to 210. Wow. The Vivitar vintage lenses, if you can find a Series 1 vintage lens, all the Vivitar Series 1's lenses are really good. Another one, if you're looking at Vivitar, the ones made by the Cosina, Cosina, and they identify those by serial number. I forget what the serial number is, but you can tell by serial number which manufacturer made Vivitar, because Vivitar doesn't manufacture lenses. They just rebrand lenses. And so Cosina made Vivitars, and the Series 1 Vivitars have always been really good. Maybe not all, but the ones I've run across have been excellent. Lenses with fewer, not rounded blades. Yes, Kevin, that's correct. Generally, sharper aperture blades, not rounded, are better. because they round the aperture blades to make the bokeh smoother, which I guess would thereby affect the starburst effect too. And Leon said he saw a lot of images from a comet that passed Earth now and all done with Olympus. Wow, I haven't seen any of those. I didn't even know there's a comet going by. And Jeff is confirming 12 to 100 has sync IS. Thanks. My goodness, I'm so far behind here. Yes, the Metabone Speed Booster converter is great. Use it with my Nikon lens. You have to play around with the number dial on the Metabones as exposure can need a boost. Okay. I have a generic. I don't know. I have to find my speed booster. So I got my new glasses the other day, and what we try with my old lenses I gave for my okay. And Jip says, or JJP, I'm sorry. Says, as much as I love customizability of Olympus cameras, it's a bit overwhelming, especially when you first start. Yes. Hello, CW. CWB Ray. I have a question about the EM1 Mark II, about the lowest shutter speed and aperture priority mode. Is there a way I can set it to not, say, go below 1/1000th of a second in aperture priority mode? You know, that's an interesting question because honestly, if you're 1/1000th of a second, your aperture is going to be wide open. So if you're looking for a wide open aperture, meaning like say f2.8, going into shutter priority and setting your shutter speed to 1/1000th of a second will ultimately solve that problem. But in very, very bright sun, you know, you could be at 1/4000th of a second and your aperture will shut down a little bit, right? So you want to fix the aperture to certain it's not a common situation, or there's not a lot of need. Let me think. That's not something it's a very, very specific use case. Let me think a second. Because some people, what they do is they do it in the flash menu. I have a lens. Yeah, I have a lens on here. Let me see what I can do. Let me go to flash menu. I'm just going to see if it works. No. This one only lets me go to 1/250th. Let me try one other menu. The E menu. Yeah, I don't think there's a way to do that exactly. Yeah, that's a very, very unique case though. I can't imagine needing aperture priority at 1/1000th of a second. Or for it to go below 1/1000th. You know, if you're thinking about sports action, then typically you would do that in shutter priority mode and set the shutter speed. So I don't have an answer for you, Ray. I don't think there's a way to do it. There might be, but I can't think of one. Yeah, you tried setting the lowest shutter speed in auto ISO. Yeah, that's not going to work when the light drops. Even though you set the ISO limits, right? the shutter speed will still go below whatever you set it there because the light is too dark. And the camera's just, the image is just going to be dark if you left it at 1/1000th of a second. So you always have to be in good light when you're at that shutter speed. But if it's dropping below the 1/1000th shutter speed that you set in auto ISO, that means it's too dark for that lens combo, lens and ISO combo. And the camera's just not going to let you do it. It's gonna force the shutter speed below whatever you set it at. Neos says, I have lots of vintage lenses. Those that are used the most are Canon FD28, f2.8. Yep, good focal length. The FD 51.4 and a contact Zeiss 35 to 70. Oh, that's an interesting lens. The 35 to 70. F3.4. Okay, I don't have any Canon. I got one Canon zoom lens, but I don't have any other Canon lenses. I've never adapted Canon to my camera. Seen some shots from the Helios that looked interesting. Soft is not bad, has its place. Yes, Helios is interesting. I think Peter Forsgaard talked about it recently. He did a vintage lens video. I don't recall if he showed any images. My memory's not that good, but I watched it. It was a good video. Oh, and today's Peter Forsgaard's birthday, I think. So if you get a chance, go over and say happy birthday, somehow on his Facebook page. Yeah, happy birthday, Peter. Komododori is asking, thanks for the info. Looking at 50mm or less. Been playing with some FD Canon series. Ah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I answered that, right? 24mm Zuiko, f2.8. I guess the Canon 28. There's actually a lot of 28mm lenses in vintage lenses that are pretty affordable, that aren't bad. It's a little bit tight, but it's not too bad. If you want to get a 35mm lens, the Nikon F2 35mm is really good. The D lens, 35mm D, f2.8, f2.8D. I forget exactly how they arrange the letters and numbers, but that's a good lens. It's a little pricey. I think they're going for 200 to 250, but it's worth it. It's a really good lens. Easy to focus. Skimming through. I have to skip everyone's conversations because I'm so behind. Frank is saying use a flash, high-speed sync, and bright sun for portrait. You can. You need a really powerful flash though. The Godox TT350, you're not going to do that. You need, I'd recommend at least the Godox 8200 or 8400 for high-speed sync outdoors. If not two of them. Neo says for vintage, the Zeiss Contax 35 to 70 is legendary but not cheap. Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. If there's a good zoom lens out there, vintage, it's not going to be cheap. The Minolta MD 35 to 70 f3.5. I have the f4. The beer can, they call it, I guess. I do like the Minolta lenses. I have a 135 f3.5 that I like. I mean, they're all soft, wide open, which is typical of vintage lenses, but once you stop them down a little, they're really good. Good morning, Jim. Where am I at? 10:38, so I'm 10 minutes behind. Let me talk faster. Robtrek, thank you, Rob. I'll try out your recommendations. Okay, Thacker, I hope that helps. I forget exactly what it was. Might have been about sharpness on the f2.8 and the EM10 Mark II. And I think both Robin Wong and Peter have videos on getting sharper images. and a lot of good tips in there as well. I have a shaky grip. Let's see. Jeff McFeeters from Lawrence, Kansas got a really good shot of the comet. Okay. Never heard of him. He's an Olympus shooter I follow on Facebook. Interesting. I am shooting a lot of waterfalls on my road trip across California. I'm really enjoying the live ND feature on the EM1 Mark III. Awesome. You know, I haven't really played with that myself yet. And are you streaming from the space station? Yeah, the mothership. You'd think I get a good shot of the comet from here, right? Okay, can a higher shutter speed decrease the quality of image? I heard something about that, but I can't recall. The only risk with using a faster shutter speed is maybe shutter shock. But no, I've never seen an instance or heard of an instant where higher shutter speed is going to mess up your images. Can you recommend a hand strap for Olympus OMD cameras? A lot of people like the what is it, Peak Design? A lot of people like those, but I don't use a hand strap, so I can't really recommend one. But when I had one made by Peak Design, and that was actually really good. I mean, it was like $50 or something for a freaking hand strap, but I bought that for my Nikon because, you know, Nikons were kind of, I don't know, I went through a lot of phases with straps and hand straps and things. But if you want a hand strap, I think the Peak Design is really good. Camarada says he did shows some Helios images that were very interesting. Oh, Peter did. Okay, good. Yeah, it's an interesting lens, and you can Google or YouTube the Helios lens. There's lots of people that have examples. I think Mattias Burling's another one that does a lot of vintage lens stuff. So if you're into vintage lenses, Mattias Burling has the best vintage lens channel. Why do I need to always? Peter's asking, why do I always seem to need to brighten virtually every photo I take in post-processing? Maybe it could be two things, right? One is the monitor that you're editing your photos on might be too dark. A lot of times monitors are calibrated, when they are calibrated, for prints. So the brightness of the monitor is set to like 120 nits or 140 nits. So that's why even when I'm editing images, I have to brighten a lot of them up even brighter than I normally would, because my monitor is set to be kind of dark for prints. So that would be my first sort of generic answer, is your monitor's too dark. Or doesn't have enough contrast, right? So you're not using a good monitor. So if you can, if you're using a laptop monitor with a very low color space gamut, low brightness, low contrast, yeah, that's going to be a problem. If you're using a high quality monitor, and you still are having to brighten your images, then I think it's just a matter of personal taste at that point, or subjective, right? You like brighter images, and there are probably images where there's a lot of high contrast. So, you know, you have a nice bright sky, but you have some shadows in the foreground or in the landscape, and those typically have to be brightened. And there's tutorials on how to adjust for that so you get a good exposure, but you know, using a zone system or using a light meter or using a spot meter in your camera to meter for where you want to be kind of at a normal exposure. So if you look at my video I did recently on spot metering, that might give you some tips on getting a better exposure in camera using the spot meter. But yeah, it's very, very common in post-processing, especially landscapes, where you always have to bring the shadows up and bring the highlights down. So you're not alone, really. Everybody has to brighten their images, generally speaking. If it's landscapes photos, if they're photos of people, well, it's really any kind of photo where there's something very bright in the image, like a clear sky, and the foreground has some shadow, you always have to brighten it. And then Ray says, thanks so much. By the way, I discovered by accident that I could get up to 3 stops of exposure comp from the M1 Mark II at ISO 200. Maybe I should simply stick to manual mode. Yeah, I mean, manual's fine. Once you got a feel for, you know, settings and exposure, you know, manual mode is no problem. I use it time to time. I'm typically an aperture priority or shutter priority. But sometimes I shoot manual. Hi Rob, any photo walk or drive-by plans for the summer? I can't wait, Serge. I really want to. I'll have to go further south or further west. I need to get out of this immediate area because it's a little bit, it's a little active right now is the best way to put it. You know, the other night, my poor mom, you know, the police came to her house the other day, knocking on her door at 2 in the morning because a guy with a gun was hiding in her backyard. And they had helicopters roaring around her house, and there was, you know, dozens of police officers escaping, you know, the yard out. And they never caught the guy. At least not that, they didn't catch him that night or in her backyard, but he was definitely in there because the gate was broken open. Because my mom locks the gates and things, but he, you know, not, you know, it's not hard to break a 50-year-old gate down, right? But he had broken into the yard and was hiding from the police, and he was apparently armed with a weapon. So yeah, I'm just I'm a little leery of going out around where I live, you know. So I need to get out a little further. Oh, Marcia's here from Florida. Hi, Marcia. See, lots of things going on here. Rob, I have just bought a shoulder strap on Amazon. Best I ever had. Oh, okay. Well, share which one you got exactly. I have a I've never liked shoulder straps because I like to hang the camera off one shoulder instead of across. But the cross strap that I used that I thought was really good was one of those rapid strap ones. I really like those, but you know, since I switched to Olympus, I can use a very thin strap, so I just make my own out of paracord now. Oh, Leon says the same thing. I use a paracord hand strap on both my EM10 Mark II and EM1 Mark II. Bought from a person. Oh, that makes it himself. Works for me. Yeah, that's what I do. Where's my... I'll just show you. Like, here's one I made for myself, right? It's probably not as fancy as the one the guy did, right? Because he's charging for it. But this is just a little fisherman's knot here, so the strap's adjustable. I can adjust the strap, and then I can make this loop a little smaller. Now it's a hand strap, and then of course, or I should say it's a wrist strap, and then this goes into the camera's loop. And then since it's adjustable, if it's around my neck, I can make it a little shorter if I'm hanging it off one shoulder. I can make it a little longer if I'm hanging it across, which is normally how I have it. So you can see I have a pretty big adjustability on both ends. And that's, so I made like, I don't know, I've made 6 straps for like $15 out of paracord and those little keychain hooks. Oh, Zebrew is recommending the Petsville lens. The Petsville lens is very interesting. It's about $500, I think, maybe more. I can't remember. It's around 500. It's not cheap anyway. And I think it only comes in one focal length, like 85 millimeter. So it's gonna be telephoto on a micro four thirds. But yeah, it's an interesting lens. Definitely check it out. Oh, David Crooks must be here. Hi, David. Sorry, I missed you. I didn't see your name up earlier. I'm really trying to move fast here. Happy Sunday, Rob. Thank you, Thomas. Happy Sunday to you. Thomas says, at robtrek, how do you spell Matthias Burling? Oh, it's Mattieus, I think. And then Burling is Burl. So Matthias Burling. Here, I'll just pull it up. YouTube. Matthias. All right, I got it. So this is his page. Nope, that's Rob's page. There it is. Matthias Burling. So not an E, it's Mattias. 113,000 subscribers. Now that I've recommended him, he's gonna go to 200,000. Now I'm still stuck here at like 20 something. Not jealous at all, no. But yeah, he has an awesome channel. Lots of vintage lens stuff. Oh wait, this is not, wait. This is the guy that does cameras all the time. He does do vintage lenses. This is not the right guy. Oh my god. Matthias. Maybe it's Matthew. Hold on. Let me look. Matthew. Let me just type vintage lenses. See what comes up here. He's a guy. Hold on. 120-year-old film develop. Here it is. Matthew Stern. Oh my god, my bad. This guy. This guy is the vintage lens guy. Matthias Burling has an awesome channel too. But this is the guy here. So my bad. Matthew Stern. And you can see he has all kinds of stuff. This was a great video developing a 120-year-old film. Definitely check that out. All right. Let me reset my screens here. All right, so my bad, Thomas. Hopefully you got that. Oh, Plato answered you too. Matthias Burling, but that's not he. I think he does some vintage stuff, more vintage camera stuff too, but he's primarily more mainstream, like cameras made in the last 10 years. But he has a great channel. Leather hand straps are pretty good. Okay, Serge. Yeah, I think leather's pretty comfortable if they do a good job with it. Cam, good morning. Using Olympus Workspace on Mac, I'm not able to batch file or save space to edit presets. Are those features only Windows, or am I doing something wrong? I don't know why you wouldn't be able to do it on a Mac, but I don't have a Mac to try. I'm a Windows guy. I'm sorry, Cam. Thanks for your suggestions. I think Peter Breaks. Thanks for your suggestions. I think both your answers are true. I will brighten my laptop screen first. Sorry to tell you it's a Mac. Okay. No, you know, Mac has one of the best screens though for photo editing. So uh, maybe you just need to brighten it. And Ray says Macs are usually the other way around, that Mac screens are brighter than normal. The images edited on Macs may appear duller on other screens. Yeah, it's a tricky it's a tricky slope, right? Trying to uh, calibrate your monitors so that the image is at least relatively consistent across uh, different different monitors. So that's why I always edit my images at like 120 to 140 nits on my monitor. So you know, if on somebody else's monitor it might look too bright, but on most people's monitors it'll be adjusted about right. Come up to New Jersey. Great safe places to go do some photos. Really? That would be nice. I need to go to Jersey sometime. I haven't been there in years. My mom was terrified, yes. It's not fun. It's not like the first time, right? Where I live. It's just so, the crime rate here is so high. If you've been following my streams, I mention it time to time. You know, when I'm the oldest one in the family, I'm gonna move out of here and live out in the mountains, somewhere in the sticks, where the only thing I have to worry about are, you know, wild animals. Nature lives out in West London, says there's not too many problems with people using guns. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Things escalate. You know, one person has a gun, then people that are afraid of people with guns get their own guns. And and that's where we live now, is at least here. I mean, it's not the guns. It's really, the problem is mainly people. People just, you know, people are just so angry. They should watch my live stream and just chill, you know? Have a coffee. Recently, I experienced a situation where the live view showed I was properly exposed and all the images were dark. And then I realized the aperture was blinking. The live view was auto boosted. Yes. You cannot trust the live view or EVF on your camera. And it's a video and this is another video I'm working on. And it's going to have a similar title, right? Don't trust your live view for exposure. It's especially true on Olympus cameras. But basically, you know, in good light, you can plus or minus 3 EV, and then the exposure is probably pretty right, what you see on the live view. But when you go beyond 3 EV, it's not right. And if you get into low light situations, the live view is useless in terms of determining exposure. So I'll have to do a video on that. And I might compare it against my Fuji or my Sony. Because they do a little better job with it than the Olympuses, in with respect to showing you the correct exposure in live view and EVF. Photography, yeah, I'm into it. I love vintage lenses, some solid feeling and mechanical. Yes, me too. I really like it. I really like this feel. You know, God, this getting a little stiff. This is like $100 lens. So when it starts to get a little stiff, you have to take the whole lens apart and re-grease it. And I'm not doing that. You know, I just spray actually some WD-40 in here. And yeah, the blades, let me see if the blades have gotten oily yet. No. My blades are still clean somehow. I think because no, I did do it this way because I didn't want the oil to get onto the lens. Because if the oil gets into the lens, then yeah, you're screwed. But if they get on the blades, not a big deal, right? But I'm still clean. Not a drop. That's not good advice though, by the way. Putting WD-40 on your old lenses. Uh it's not a hack or anything, okay? So don't, I'm not saying you do it. I'm just saying this is what I did. Because this thing was so stiff, I felt like I was gonna break it off the camera. Trying to just trying to focus. It's Ray says it's a bit annoying that despite switching off live boost, the camera still overrides that, and only an indicator of switch live boost is the aperture over. Yeah, it's you know, usually when something's blinking though, it's usually because the camera's not capable of achieving that exposure with the settings that you have, and it's trying to show you which setting is the one that's getting hit. Um, so you know, for very bright scenes and aperture priority, your aperture light might start blinking, telling you you need to stop down a little bit to get the exposure, because you're already at like 1/8,000th of a second or 1/4,000th of a second, so you have to stop down a little bit. Hi Rob, what am I doing wrong? Jane Mack says, what am I doing wrong? Using the EM1 Mark II and still photos have a beautiful blue sky, but then I take a video with the same setting and the sky is muddy. I'd have to see how you're doing it, because if you're in a photo mode, you know, like AP or S, and you just push the record button, the camera records video in program mode. Now, if you go into video mode and you try to use the same settings, uh, you know, say you put the video in aperture priority and you set your aperture, um, I'd have to see it, but typically, you know, video is a JPEG image. Think of video as a JPEG image. So if there's a very high dynamic range scene, then it's gonna either blow out the highlights or mess up the color so things start to look muddy just like a JPEG would, or it's gonna get grainy, right? So when you're using when you're taking a regular photo, if you're shooting in RAW, you can definitely get much better images than you ever will with the video mode. Now, if you shoot a JPEG, like you just take a picture and look at the back of the screen and you see the settings, I'd have to see those settings compared to what your video settings are, and then I can get a better feel of what's going on. But typically it's because the video mode is a JPEG. It's an 8-bit image in video. Um, and on top of that is probably a smaller color gamut as well. But yeah, my guess is because you're comparing maybe a raw image or a processed raw image to the video, and the video will never match that. And that's why you see all these cameras like saying they have 10-bit 422 video. You know, if you can shoot 10-bit 422, you'll get much better image quality and things won't be so muddy or grainy. But maybe, you know, I have a video about video settings on Olympus cameras that you can watch, which kind of explains the challenges of taking a picture versus using video mode. And I go into a lot of detail about the shutter speed and exposure in video mode versus photography. So watch that, and you can leave a comment on that video if you still have a challenge, but leave a comment on that video and let me know what your settings are for a photo that you took that you liked, and what the settings were for a video of the same scene and you felt that image was muddy. Then maybe I can diagnose a little bit what's going on. David Crook says, let me know if you want to go for a road trip to the sunflowers. Okay, Dave. I'll give that some thought. Maybe we go during golden hour. I guess it depends which way the flowers are facing, right? But man, 7 a.m. is really early. Like today, right? God, I woke up at like 9 o'clock. I can't imagine like leaving the house by 6, which means I have to get up at 5 o'clock to start packing the gear, because just my head is a mess. And Lawrence says he's gone wrist straps for all his cameras. Easy to store in a bag and works like a champ. Oh, and that reminds me, Lauren, for the photo stream, I should have emailed you last night. For the photo editing stream, if you can send me the raw image instead of the image you sent. Because you sent me the JPEG, but that that's already an awesome picture. It's just nothing I can do. I tried, I looked at it and I'm like, well, there's nothing to crop. And the highlights are already gone, which is okay because it looks good like that. So maybe send me a raw image that I can edit, but otherwise it's going to be a very quick edit on your image today. And for those of you, if you don't know what I'm talking about, after this stream, like at 12 o'clock, I do a photo editing live stream where you send your photos in and I edit them. And I have links down below to where you can submit your images. And also, if you want to edit my photo, you can download my photo and edit it, and then we talk about it in the stream as well. I like to pick photos that I had trouble with, but I think there's an image there, so maybe you guys will see it and where I couldn't. I'm afraid of the xenography guy. Oh, I don't know who that is. But xenography apparently has a good vintage lens channel. His voice tone is word, but great context. So yeah, check out xenography or xenography, however you pronounce that. Come to Portugal, sunny and third safest country in the world. Yeah, never been there. I don't like to travel though. Not a fan. Yeah, with no standards, the end result of display is editing for the masses is impossible. It is. It's hard. Rob, that camera strap I bought and used from Amazon is made from Waka, WAKA, for 17 pounds. But so Nature is recommending the WAKA Waka camera strap. Has a quick snap release and backup strap in case of a failure. Ray says my streams are therapeutically calming. Thank you. I'm a regular Bob Ross in regards to his soothing voice. Thanks. I've heard that before though, not just like in the streams, but people just say when they talk to me, they just feel so much calmer and more relaxed. Like all their worries just kind of go away. It's always very flattering when I hear that. Hi Rob, Jason's asking, hi Rob, is it possible to use CAF in the M10 Mark II when using it as a webcam? I can't seem to make it work. Yes, you have to put it in movie mode and then select CAF. If you're in a photo mode, you have to turn on the other thing. Let's see. Try turning this. Does this have a battery or not? No. Give me a second. Where's my battery box? Anybody else have like a giant battery box where you keep all your batteries? Probably not, because you have like one camera, right? I'm the only idiot with like 20 cameras. All right. Ooh, you know, this would be a good chance to try out my new feature here too. Another time. I think it's in the AF menu. Of course not. Yeah, it is. So go into menu A, and you see where it says full-time AF, the second line there. Turn that on. So right there, and just turn that on, and see if that helps. All right. That was for Jason, and then Dave says, at robtrek and at nature with music, does using a ND filter help with dynamic range issues with bright skies to darker landscape pictures? Not really. Using an ND filter cuts the light across the entire image, so ND filters are typically used, you know, with to keep the aperture wide open, you know, for either filming or for photography. But if you want a wide open aperture with a long exposure, that's typically what ND filters are, like waterfalls and things like that. But it doesn't help with dynamic range so much, unless your shutter speed's at 1/8000th of a second and you're still too bright. Then you can add an ND filter to cut the light down so you can get down to a reasonable shutter speed and reasonable aperture. And Dave says, I have some good sunset shots at the sunflowers in previous years. Oh, okay. I think my buddy Walter Rose, another local photographer, he's gone there before, and he got some great images too. And Dave says, can you use pictures for your editing stream that use Canon RAW? Most likely, I'd have to use my Lightroom to edit it, but yeah. What I have to do is bring up Lightroom separately, because normally I edit using Olympus Workspace. But I noticed I got some submissions that were like Nikon RAWs and DNGs. You know, Workspace doesn't handle those, so I have to do them in Lightroom. So I'll have to. But yeah, I can do Canons in Lightroom, and the results will be similar. But Lightroom's a lot better than Workspace. I can do a lot more in that with brushes and things. Lauren says, hi Rob, the image is done with a 14-42 and it worked. While using the 45, it's awesome. The little zoom, cheap. Yes, the kit lenses rock. I agree. David Crooks, he was asking about the filter on the camera. Oh, you mean the live ND filter. Yeah, that's right. David has the M1 Mark III. David Crooks. I don't use it enough to give you a real answer. In theory, it should give you a better image, right? Because it's stacking images. In theory, probably a better, you know, I don't know how many images live ND stacks, but it's probably 8 or more. So in theory, it should give you a better image, but I haven't used live ND enough to give you a legitimate answer. I can give you a theoretical one. That's it. Sorry. Thanks, Tony, for clearing that up. Let's see. Kamadori says, have 7 cameras between spouse and myself, so you're not alone, right? I know, and then each camera has 2-3 batteries at least, so you know you can run into a nice battery collection after a while. I know about the ones in the photo editing software. Thanks. Okay. My videos remind me of Bob Ross. That's funny. And Bob says, graduated ND filter will reduce the dynamic range. Graduate, yeah. If you're talking about filters you screw on, because I think David was asking about, or whoever was asking about ND filters, not graduated ND filters. But graduated ND filters, yes, do technically reduce dynamic range, which sounds bad, but it's a good thing. You wanna bring the dynamic range within the range of the camera. So technically you have to reduce it, but then you get an image that's high dynamic range. Because that's what HDR is, right? It's bringing in, it's actually bringing all of the dynamic range of the image into a narrower range. So it's reduced dynamic range in HDR. So it's kind of a, what's the word, oxymoron or contradiction, you know. And then the Marked Wolf, hey, how are you? Do you recommend getting 100% sRGB laptop when editing photos? As close as possible. Anything over 90% is fine. What you really have to look at, in addition to the sRGB numbers, you know, 95, 96% or 100%, the other thing you have to look at is the contrast ratio. You want to get as close to 1,000 or better, 1,000 to 1. You know, if you're like at 900 something to 1, that's fine. But 1,000 to 1, 1,100 to 1, the higher the better in terms of contrast, that number. And then also the brightness and nits. If it's a monitor you're going to use at home, 300 nits is fine because you're going to reduce that down to probably 200 or less anyway. If you're talking about a laptop, yeah, you're asking about a laptop, 300 nits or better. You know, 400 nits, ideal, right? And then the latest thing now is the HDR compatibility as well, which I don't know how useful that is for photography. I'm still looking into that, but if you get a monitor with a 96 to 100% sRGB, in addition to 300 nits or brighter, in addition to 1,000 to 1 contrast or better, that's an excellent monitor. And one of the, I think it's MSI, has a new monitor that's like 1,000 nits, right? It's called a mini LED monitor. So if it has all the other specs you want in terms of hardware, that's a very interesting monitor that's coming out. And I think that's going to replace all of the current IPS panels that we see on laptops now, because IPS has been around a long time. But the best IPS monitors, you know, that's kind of where you need to be. And Dave says, Rob, I will go from 5 batteries to using a power bank. Yes. I'm a big fan of HDR and I programmed it to my C1. Yeah, HDR is awesome. Neo says, very important for video stuff to keep a shutter speed with the rule of 180 and keeping the aperture open. That's a creative choice, I think, Neo. I mean, rule of thumb is, yeah, use the 180 rule, keep your aperture wide open so that you keep your ISOs low so you get the best quality video. And the 180 rule sort of gives that more natural look to it, what our eyes are used to seeing already. So if you're shooting at 24p, you want to have a shutter speed of 1/50th or 1/48th if you can. And that's the rule of thumb, right? And that's why people buy ND filters, so they can bring their exposure down. And I have a video that talks about that, but people do break those rules for creative reasons, just like we do in photography. They choose even slower shutter speeds or faster shutter speeds to get more motion blur or to get kind of that gritty look. I don't know, where it's very, you know, like I said, there's a lot of creative things too in video, just like in photography. Are we photo editing soon? Yes. What the, oh crap, it's 11:30. Let me see what time I set it up for. Did I set it up for 11:30? I did. I have to go. I have to go do my editing. Yeah, that ultra sharp is pretty awesome. So thanks everybody for coming in, and I'm gonna go over to my live stream editing, photo editing live stream. So if you submitted a photo, we'll I'm gonna edit those. So sorry, I'm a little bit flustered now. So I appreciate you guys coming in. I'm sorry for the abrupt ending here. We'll catch you guys next week on Thursday.